Welcome back, everybody, to True Talk with True Motion, where a couple of guys talk about how to make the world a better place and hopefully make your day a little bit better in the process. My name is Mark, followed by my co-host, Steven. Let's get things kicked off. Today's topic is balance. So, Steven, when you hear the word balance, what is the first thing that you think of?
I think of the term balance as having a good center, being sort of equal in many different things, putting effort towards one direction as well as making sure that you're not lacking in other routes.
Yeah, that's an awesome explanation of balance. Obviously, Steven's a far deeper thinker than myself. When I hear the term balance, I think of not falling over, not hitting the ground, staying on your feet. But balance, as you can already tell, has many different aspects and assets when it comes to balance. So today we're going to kind of explore balance in the martial arts realm, balance in a personal realm, balance in a relationship realm, and balance in a world and semi-political realm. We're not going to get too political on this show, but see how balance really affects every aspect of our lives. I mean, whether we want to admit it or not, balance is always playing an effect on what it is that we do and sometimes how we make decisions. So let's just get started with the martial arts realm portion of it. When it comes to balance, balance is key to anything that you do here in the dojo. Like right now, we're getting prepared for tournament. We've got a tournament coming up in October. So we've been drilling forms and sparring, and balance is huge when it comes to both forms and sparring. If you don't have a good center, if you're not on balance, there's no way you can produce any sort of power or speed in your forms or in your sparring. So when it comes to balance, balance is very key when it comes to performance and also your sparring as well. So let's talk about it in the terms of the form realms first. So balance when it comes to forms is, like Steven was talking about earlier, it has that centering aspect of it, to where if you're too far on your heels or too far on your toes, you can definitely see your balance either leaning forward or backwards, and you can't really produce any sort of power or speed or flowing type motions when it comes to being able to perform a form or kata. So I've started to notice that with the students here that practice, the ones that practice seem to have a little bit better balance because they're constantly practicing a certain type of motion. Have you started to see kind of the separation with the students when it comes to balance in their forms? Like the one you're like, okay, this person actually kind of practices a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely, balance is one of those things that when you practice, you're not surprised by the next move of the form. And when you're surprised, guess what happens? You often lose your balance. But when you practice, you're like, okay, I know what the next step is. I am confident and I'm going to change my stance from this one to this other stance. And I'm able to do that without feeling like I'm off balance. It feels like I'm in control the whole way.
That is actually an excellent point. I've always thought about that, but I've never heard it verbalized like that being surprised by the next move. If you know what the next move is, you know how to prepare and balance for it. Just like, well, I mean, we'll kind of go right off into the life aspect. When you have something unexpected happen to you, it tends to throw you off balance. You're not prepared for it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to deal with this. That is a great correlation between how the martial arts realm translates right into the real world, not only just fighting aspects, but that mental aspect as well. When you know what is coming next, you're not surprised. And when you're not surprised, you tend not to lose your balance mentally. That is great. I think the same thing actually could be said for sparring. When you know what you want to throw and the combos that you want to do, and you've studied and you've watched how other people move, typically you get hit when you get surprised with something and you're off balance. That is a great comparison for the importance of balance. So when you're practicing anything, whether it's martial arts, your career, your relationships, when you're involved and invested in those, you don't get surprised. And when you don't get surprised, you don't lose your balance. It's not like you get knocked off of what you're doing. That is a great way of thinking of it, because it's very true. It's very, very true. When you know what you're doing, nothing really surprises you. And then when you're not surprised, you can really focus on the task at hand, not, holy crap, what just happened to me? Now I got to focus on this, and then all of a sudden your whole day's out of whack. I mean, how many times has that happened well, I know it's happened to me, where all of a sudden you wake up and you get an unexpected email or phone call, whether it's hey, you need to do this, or hey, you have your routine, but hey, I need you to do this instead of that. And it's the rest of your day is just kind of a little off because it was unexpected. It was unexpected, and all of a sudden you're oh, I've got to readjust this, I got to readjust that, and the next thing you know, you're trying to catch up to the actual day itself. I mean, have you noticed that sort of
It's huge. It's called escalations in the corporate world.
Okay.
It's something where it's you kind of have to do your regular job, walking on eggshells, or be very careful, because you're always in the back of your mind. It's oh, something could go wrong. So I could be drawn away from this and immediately put to something that'll put me out of balance.
That would make sense. The escalation. Okay. Yeah. Not only do you have it in your corporate world, but that's an everyday life thing. For your average American, all of a sudden you get an unexpected bill, and you're holy crap, where did this come from? How am I supposed to pay this? And all of a sudden you're fixated on that one thing, as opposed to, oh, well, that one thing happened. Okay, well, we'll have to figure out how to deal with that. And then you just kind of continue on with your day. It's very interesting how we tend to focus on the negative aspects that happen to us, as opposed to focusing on the positive things that happen to us. And I don't know if that's that victim culture that we're trying to see in society nowadays, but how often do you talk to people and you're hey man, how's your day? And they're well, and they never really say anything positive about it, as opposed to be hey, how's your day? And be oh my gosh, my day's great. I got to go to work was fantastic. I got to help people. Man, it is good to be alive. As opposed to talking to most people and they're why am I here? This is the worst. You hear the doom and gloom from a lot of people. And you're okay, this person's out of balance. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, that's that whole not being surprised was an aspect I honestly never really thought of, but it makes complete sense when it comes to balance. That is a great thing. Another thing when it comes to balance in the martial arts, so now going more into the sparring aspect, is overcommitting, finding those extremes. So if you're throwing everything you got into this one punch and you miss, man, you're kind of hosed, because all of a sudden they're behind you, they're off to the side, they're countering you. You're typically a little bit slower when you're throwing those big committed punches and kicks, and you wonder why you can't land any of them and everybody's beating you. So that whole balance is being able to throw and strike without, well, I mean, easiest term is without taking yourself off balance. It's having that being committed, but not overly committed to where all your efforts work against you. Okay. And it's funny because, and you can probably, you've probably noticed this yourself a lot already. The people that tend to overcommit are the people that just get started. The people that are just brand new to sparring, where they just don't know any better yet. They have to figure that out and learn it for themselves, where it's oh my gosh, I'm not landing anything and these people are always getting out of the way. Have you seen that just in your own personal sparring? Just when I first started, I was like this, and now I'm not. Or
Yeah, I definitely see that in the newer sparrers, that they want to throw a big, rigid, strong punch, or they want to just wind up and unload a big kick. And you don't want to, as someone who might be aware of that, you don't want to get caught by that, because that's going to hurt. But that's the only thing they're throwing. So you want to be aware and be able to deal with it and help them on their journey, because they're learning, by giving them direction in the form of like, oh, you're open over here, or you threw everything at me and that was great, but now where are you compared to where I am?
No, that's very, very true. It's funny. I always tell everybody's always all like, oh my gosh, it must be so terrifying sparring like black belts and this and that. No, not at all. Like, I'm not terrified of sparring black belts at all, because I know, one, they have control, and two, if they hit me, I'm not going to get hurt.
Yeah.
The most terrifying people I have ever sparred with are white, yellow, and orange belts, and white, yellow, and orange belt men specifically. Why? Because they got to try to show how tough they are. And like Steven was saying, they will throw everything into these punches and kicks, and if they catch you, you are in big trouble. So the scariest people to spar, in my opinion, are white, yellow, and orange belts. Like, they're like, hey, do you want to spar? And I'm like, oh, no, but sure, absolutely, I'll try to help you. And then I always try to break the ice and laugh and, kid around and be like, I'm like, just please don't kill me. And they're like, what? Like, you're a black belt. And I'm like, yeah, like I'm going to be going at a different speed than you. And if I hit you, it'll be okay. You'll be fine. But if you hit me, you're going to come in with like full power, this and that. And it's like, I don't want to have to like fight for my life just to have a fun little sparring match. Yeah. So balance is very much that hard and soft. When you think about another form of balance, is we always think, again, like not overcommitting, not losing your not falling. That's one aspect, but another great aspect of balance is the balance you kind of see in nature, that hard versus soft. When it comes to martial arts, we always think that you have to be like hard and like everything has to be powerful. In some aspects, it does have to be hard and powerful. We've talked about this just all the time in classes. When it comes to balance, you have to learn how to go from being hard to being soft, because if you're just hard all the time, like everything's tense, everything's powerful, everything's rigid, you're like the big strong oak tree, which is very impressive and strong and rooted to the ground. But then when a big windstorm comes along, man, those are the first things that break and crack and get thrown out of the ground, and just bad things tend to happen when you're too hard for too long. Like, you get injured, you pull muscles, you hurt yourself. I mean, those are very common things with people that are too stiff or too hard for too long, versus people that are soft. The problem with being too soft is you've got nothing behind anything that you strike or do. So the benefits to being soft is you typically tend not to get hurt, because you're kind of that whole go with the flow type mentality of, well, they hit me, well, I'll just move with it, or, oh, they're punching at me, well, I'll just move this over to the side. I won't try to fight fire with fire. So that is a very good plus side about being soft. The bad thing about being too soft is, again, if you end up hitting that person and you don't know how to tighten up or get into that stiff, hard position, unfortunately, you don't have much power behind it. So the benefit of being soft is you tend not to get hurt. So it's another great way of thinking about it. And again, this is just nature doing its thing. Babies are very, very soft. And they fall, they roll, they get bent in all these sorts of weird directions, and they end up typically never really getting hurt. Why? Because they don't know how to tighten up for anything, because they just don't know how to do it. Versus when you deal with like an older person, man, they sit too hard down on a chair and they can break a hip. They can barely move. They can't reach down and touch their toes. They can't tie their shoes. When you get older, you tend to get stiff if you don't move around. So that's balance coming into play. So if you don't move enough, your body stiffens up. So if you don't want to be stiff, well, you got to move around. That's the whole yin yang, that whole soft versus hard, weak versus strong, soft versus stiff, all that stuff. And when you first start your training, you're very much one-sided. And then you start to see yourself transition into the other side. And then when you get to a point, you find how to tap into both. So is that something you've noticed when you're with your own personal training, Stephen?
I've noticed that with my own personal training. I definitely think I started off as the oak tree. I definitely will be like, oh, I got to be tough. I have to be strong in everything. And that was probably just because I didn't have a lot of flexibility. I didn't really do much stretching until I started taking martial arts. And I just didn't know any other way besides being that having the rigidity. And then I definitely went to the flexible and being able to have things, roll off my back, being able to move faster, get out of the way, redirect. But at the same time, then my whole mentality changed, and I felt like, oh, well, I'm so flexible. I'm doing all these things that my strikes they don't have any oomph behind them. I feel like I'm spending most of my time in sparring, dodging or getting out of the way or redirecting or blocking, and you can only block for so much until something gets in, and if you don't have anything to retaliate with, then it feels like you're just a punching bag, and that's a weekly thing sometimes. Everyone has that week, and then I started to put those two together. So I had the rigidity of be like, okay, everything I have to do has to have some power behind it, and that add to that. Well, when I'm not doing anything, or when I'm not striking, I can be soft. I can be flexible, and I can move around a lot faster and then when I throw my strike, I can throw it a lot faster because I'm more flexible. And then at the very end, right when my strike connects, that's when I have to tense up. That's when I have to have that rigid oak foundation, and I have to start that from my core. I realized in my martial arts training that I threw everything from my arms, which isn't great. You want to make sure you incorporate your whole body into every strike, starting from the hips. So building that in my martial arts training, that's sort of how I learned about the dichotomy of the two.
Nice, yeah, and that's very, very true. Because we can't be all one versus the other, and this is this is why I truly love and appreciate martial arts. Every single granted, we do a certain form here, but like just martial arts in general, or just movement-based things in general, really kind of teach you these lessons that we learn on the mat, but yet, man, they're so applicable just in our daily life, like the whole hard versus soft. Like when it comes to parenting, when you have parents and when you're raising kids, both parents can't be the same way. Both parents can't be soft. Why? Because then you'll raise soft kids. Both parents can't be hard, because then your kids will resent you and then want to have nothing to do with you. You'll always have that good cop, bad cop scenario. And it always varies, and it differs between the parents. So like for instance, with my family, man, my wife is super easy on my son. Like she'll let him get away with anything, and then it's up to me to be the opposite. I have to be the opposite to counterbalance exactly what she's doing. And then it's a complete opposite for the daughter. Like the daughter can do whatever she wants in my eyes, and I'll be like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. And then, my wife has to be the balance to that and be like super hard on her, because she knows what it takes for what it needs to be a professional woman in today's society. And I'm not a woman, so I can't teach her that. Just like my wife can be as gentle as she wants with my son, but she's not a man, so she doesn't know how to teach him how to become a man. So you have to have those two balancing forces in your own household. And it's the same thing with friendships. Like, if you only have friends that are like you, that's going to be pretty boring. Pretty boring. I mean, I love how I am personally, but I also like how I have a lot of friends that are not like me, because I have to have that varying difference between how I am versus other people are. I'm naturally a pretty quiet person, so if I only hang out with quiet people, that's going to be pretty damn boring.
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to have a conversation with somebody. So like, let's find people that aren't necessarily like you. Like, I've got a really good friend that I've had forever. Oh my God. He had trouble like having friends because everybody thought he was a jerk. But I was always really good friends with him because we were so different in so many aspects. He was super loud and obnoxious and this and that. I wasn't. I was very quiet and just kind of went with the flow. So when he started going too far over the edge, that was like, okay, let's bring you back in. Hey, okay, that was too far. Come on back. And then with me, it kind of helped pull me forward a little bit. Be like, hey, you're being boring. Like, let's kind of get out there. So yeah, in terms of balance in that aspect, you have to be able to find people that aren't like you. You need to have your own balance. So you need to figure out, if you're quiet, that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with being quiet. But then you should probably try to seek out friends that aren't necessarily quiet. Why? Because they'll maybe put you or push you to a place to where, man, I didn't really feel it. I didn't realize I could do that. And then you start looking around and be like, well, this isn't so bad. Or this is bad, but I'm glad I did it because now I understand why certain people act a certain way. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think those opposing opposites, that fire and ice, you need to have those. And it's very, very interesting. I don't even remember. I think I was just looking at Instagram, to be honest with you. I saw a post that said the happiest marriages are where the wife is a little bit on the fiery side and the husband is on the calmer side. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, that is so true. So true. When you have someone that's one way or the other, they tend to balance each other out. Okay? And that is key to longevity. But yet, if both of you guys have fiery personalities, makes great television, but it doesn't make great relationships. Okay? And if both of you guys are both kind of just like that whole go with the flow, you're not going to do anything meaningful or exciting in your life, because you're like, let's just sit on the couch and read a book. Or, I mean, which, by the way, there's nothing wrong with sitting on the couch reading a book, but there's more to life than that. So yeah, when it comes to relationships, you have to seek out people that are not like yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to like always agree with them or always have to be around them. But you have to find ways of balancing yourself out. So if you're one way, you have to have friends that are the other way. So it brings both of you guys back into center. Do you find that you have friends like that yourself?
Yeah. What you could consider friends that are definitely the other way, to my way. And I think that's great because it realizes, first, it puts into perspective, my opinion's not the only opinion, as much as I'd like to believe that.
Yeah, we all like to think that.
But it also helps with that differing perspective, with that differing personality. It just sort of says, oh, well, let's do this because this is what they like. Or they're doing this because they want to see what I like.
Yeah, very, very much so. So when it comes to friendships, relationships, put yourself out there a little bit and try to go with something that's not you. Okay? There's nothing wrong with you, but you need to find your balance within yourself in terms of when you're putting two people together. Okay? You may have personal balance, and that's fantastic, but when you throw in someone else, now everything's different, so you need to find that balance between your personality and their personality. If you're both the same, hey, it may work, it may not work. Okay, if you're both, different, it may work, it may not work, but they statistically show that the happier couples are the couples that are opposite. And if you think about it, because I've had this discussion with my wife as well, and she's talked about other people. Have you noticed every relationship has a spender and a saver?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, you have a spender and a saver, and those relationships work. If you both are spenders, you're going to have a lot of conflict because money is a real big fighting issue.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have two savers, I don't even think I've met a couple that's like that, to be honest with you. Like, that'd be like a unicorn.
Yeah.
But, typically you have spenders and savers. It's that whole balance. So the saver will reel in the spender, and then the spender will be like, no, we're fine. Like, we can do this. It's okay. So that's another balancing opposites. And it's interesting now that we're kind of talking about the opposites, man, it seems like just with the world and society in general nowadays, we are going so far on extremes that both extremes are becoming a little scary. Okay. And if we want to truly, truly, truly start to make a difference in this world, we can't follow the extremes. We can't follow the extremes on this side. We can't really follow the extremes on that side, because both sides have merit as long as people are willing to listen to each other and understand that you may have differences, but ultimately everybody's kind of saying the same thing. Like, everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be free to make the decisions that they want to make. Everybody, wants to provide a life for their family. Like, nobody's all like, oh man, I can't wait to wake up and like start making hell for everybody else. And man, I hope I get into a fight today. I mean, like, I haven't met too many people that are like that. I mean, are there people in the world that are like that? Probably. But I don't run into those people on a day-to-day basis. So when it comes to those extremes, man, we have to be very, very careful, like how far we go, like one side or the other. And I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed too, I'll let you kind of speak on that in a second, but the farther people are one side or the other, the harder it is to talk to them. Not because you don't want to talk to them, but they're not willing to talk back or listen. Have you noticed that with like just people in general?
Yeah. In all aspects, this isn't just whose ideals you buy behind, but it's the further someone is invested into something, the more they feel like they are the voice of that thing, and they go into an extreme. And knowledge is good, but they go into an extreme, and then it becomes the fact it's like, oh, I've studied this more than you. I don't want to talk to you on your level. I want you to talk to me on my level. And they aren't willing to say, oh, well, let's meet in the middle, or let's say this is what our common ground is, because the common ground is actually much smaller for someone who's so invested in one extreme or the other.
No, that I think is a great point. Because people get very passionate about certain topics and certain ideas, and sometimes we get too wrapped up in it, and that becomes kind of our identity, kind of like what you were just talking about. And they're not willing to either talk down with people, or talk like everybody's like, you've got to be on my level. And again, those are those balances. It's like, if you're only waiting for people to talk up with your level, you may not get a chance to talk to anybody. Or if you're only willing to talk down to people, then you come across as a little condescending. And so it's very, we just have to be careful when it comes to those extremes, and just honestly be willing to listen to each other. Because, and more than anything, as much as we like to tease and make fun of each other, making fun of each other in like that aspect isn't really going to do anything.
Right.
I mean, yes, is everybody going to get a good chuckle out of some of these memes we see? Absolutely. But is that really making it is that really helping the situation? Unfortunately, the answer is no. I mean, I'm not saying that nobody should be teased, or, I mean, there's healthy teasing out there. I mean, but if we really want to try to come to a resolution and a solution, we can't make fun of each other in that aspect anymore. Like, you can make fun of each other afterwards. That's fine. You know, little teasing like that builds thicker skin. You'll be fine.
Strengthens the bones.
Absolutely. It's like milk for your soul.
Yep.
But I think one of the last aspects of balance I think we should talk about is time. Everybody has this notion nowadays, or the key, or these catchphrases of the work-life balance. Work-life balance is going to be very, very subjective based on your current life situation. Now, my version of work-life balance may not be as popular as other people's, but it's my version, and that's could be right, could be wrong, I don't know, but this is what I'm going with. I feel like if you're single, you should have no work-life balance. Like, if you're single and you're in your 20s, you should be working your guts out until you're 30, and then by that point, you have really made something for yourself, and then you can choose what it is the hell that you want to do. Do you want to start a family? Do you want to keep working, being single? Because if you did it right, you could theoretically retire when you're 30 if you've done things correctly. Okay? That works great when you're single. You don't have anybody else to answer to. You don't have a family. You don't have a wife. You don't have kids. It's very easy to have a zero work-life balance when the only person you got to worry about is yourself. Okay? When you have a family, these are discussions you need to have with your partner. Okay? Now, when I was younger, obviously, I had zero work-life balance. I literally closed 2 days a year. It was Christmas Day and New Year's Day. Those were the only 2 days the dojo was closed. That's it. Okay? Then obviously on Sunday. But every holiday we were open, and it was just business as usual, because you're trying to build something. And if you're trying to build something with just 1 foot in the water, it ain't going to happen. Okay? So you got to be all in. But then when I met my wife, we had to have these discussions of, well, I don't have a whole lot of time. Are you okay with not having 100% of my time? And those were hard discussions to have, because obviously, as you know, as a partner, you want to have the most of your partner. You want them to be around. You want them to be involved. And we had to have that discussion of, I work a lot. Are you okay with me working a lot? And know that with whatever free time I have, it's your free time. It's the family's free time. And we had to have that discussion. And to her credit, she said, no, I'm very proud that you work a lot and you take pride in your business and you're trying to help people. And I will take the time that you're willing to give me. And to her credit, she has stuck through with that and not really harassed me about working too hard. Now, granted, there's been rocky times where it's like, hey, you really need to take this day off so we can go to this family function. And sometimes that's been hard to be like, well, I don't want to go to that family function. But to keep the peace, it's like, okay, I will take this day off to go to this family function. And you have to look at yourself and be like, what am I willing to sacrifice? Am I willing to sacrifice games? Am I willing to sacrifice birthdays? And I did sacrifice some of those, and I don't necessarily regret it, but I wish I was a little bit more present when my kids were younger, when they did their dance competitions or athletics and this and that. And I feel like I made the important ones, but unfortunately I didn't make all of them. But I was doing that so when I get older, I'm investing this time now so I can have lots of time later when they're adults, when they have kids. I wanted to invest time now so I could have lots more time later. That's my theory on work-life balance. Again, that's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. Everybody's like, oh, you should have this balance now. And that's fine. I mean, everybody can choose to have whatever kind of work-life balance they want. But I feel like this one, when you're running, let me rephrase, when you're running your own business, it is very hard to have a quote-unquote healthy work-life balance. So you have to understand that going into it. Well, I mean, you can probably hit on this more than I can. I mean, you were in corporate America for a while. Now you've started your own business. Have you noticed a difference with your own personal, work balance?
I have. It's the time is mine, but that's a good and a bad thing. I have to be the captain of the ship and actually get stuff done. And my life has to take a step back for that. This upcoming trip is going to be the first trip I've taken in a long time, even since being in corporate America. And even then, I expect that I'm going to spend an hour or two a day working. It's just that's how it is when you're running your own business, especially a completely digital business. Like, you can't step away from it. But I think the biggest thing with work-life balance is that when you're in a corporate work and you, even if you're not on the clock, so to speak, your mind, at least mine, is always thinking about, okay, what do I got to do to move forward in these different projects?
Yeah, no,
What's the next step? What's the next step? I can't turn that off.
Yeah, I understand.
So it's something that for me is not work-life balance, when it's like I have to find something to literally take my mind off of that topic for me to not continue to think about that.
Yeah, it could literally last 24 hours
if
you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could go to sleep thinking about, okay, what am I going to do on this project? Wake up, hits you within 5 minutes of waking up. You're like, oh, I got this to do today.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree. When it comes to running your own business, yeah, there really is no off switch. I mean, you take it home with you. You do your best to not let it overpower you when you're at home. But, I mean, it can leak through, and you do have to make sure that when you are home, and you're dedicating your time with the family and whoever it is that you're with at that point. But yeah, it's not like you clock in and you clock out and then you just go home. It's not that type of scenario anymore. So that is very, very true. Yeah, so I mean, everybody's got their own different type of work-life balance. The key is you have to communicate with people and find out what works well for you. And everybody's going to have a different version of their work-life balance. I mean, it just so happens mine works for me and my family. It may not work for everybody's family, but it works for me and my family because we've learned how to create more time and make it just that's our time. So like you were saying, this is going to be your first trip you've had in a while. Like I said, before I met my wife, I took 0 vacations, 0 time off. And to her credit, she persuaded or coaxed me into actually taking time off as well. And she'll, if we ever get her on the show, she'll say it. The first vacation we ever took, I was a nervous wreck. Like, I was constantly worried about the dojo. Is it going to set on fire? Like, are all the students going to quit? Like, every worst case scenario ran through my head. And it was like, why? It's okay. I came back to the dojo. Everything was okay. And it was just like a 5-day trip that we took. And it's like, okay, so that wasn't so bad. So now we actually closed the dojo the last 2 weeks of the year. And my family's version of Christmas is we take vacations. And our goal is to go on vacation for the last 2 weeks of the year to build some memories and just spend time with each other. Now, that last 2 weeks isn't going to make up for all the time we've missed, but it is a healthy start. Okay, it's like I was saying earlier, I'm investing a lot of the time now to gain more time later, and more time when I'm still fairly young, not when I'm 60, 70 and you can't move. you know. I want to make sure, I want to be able to get to the point to where it's like when we retire, it's in our 50s, you know, and all of a sudden it's like we've got, you know, hopefully another 30 some odd years to really do stuff together. That's my version. That's my idea. Again, that's not for everybody. That's fine. But when it comes to balance, as you can see, we have lots of different aspects of balance. We've got the physical, we've got the mental, we've got the yin yang philosophy, the balance in nature. You've got your hard, you've got your soft, you've got your predators and your victims, you've got your light and soft, you've got your dark and light, you know, all those different shiny dull. I mean, we can sit here and list like the opposites of each other all over the place, and those are just nature's balance. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that we're constantly, as best we can, in that center with everything that we're doing. Now, are we always going to be in balance? No, we're not. The key is to recognize when you're not in balance and try to figure out ways to bring you back into balance. Okay? So again, when we talk about like the work-life balance, you may be out of balance in your work-life balance, but you counter it with another aspect of balance. Okay? Kind of like we talked about with the friendship thing or the relationship. So if you're quiet, they're usually talkative. So if you're out of balance in one aspect, hopefully you've regained your overall balance in another aspect of your life. So those are just things you always kind of want to be aware of, pay attention to, and constantly know it's going to be an ever-evolving, ever-changing thing. So we could go on and on for hours about balance, but I feel like 40 minutes is pretty good. But yeah, if you have any questions, comments, topics you would like to talk about or like us to talk about, please feel free to comment below. Make sure you like and subscribe, share the show. We're just a couple of karate guys from South Jordan, Utah, trying to put the message out there about building better people and making the world a better place. We will not be posting an episode next week because, as Steven alluded to, he's going to be out of town, and I will be out of town in Los Angeles for our Orange County tournament and to watch the Philadelphia Eagles put a beat down on the Rams. So go Birds. We would like to see that. So unfortunately, we will not be posting an episode the following week, but we will get caught up with a couple more episodes. And in about 2 weeks, we will be having our first guest on. I confirmed that with him today. We will be having Master Lenton on to talk about his experience with the martial arts and how he brought the first professional martial arts studio to the Utah area. So again, thank you for joining us. Steven, any kind of closing remarks?
Just share what keeps you in balance in the comments below.
Yeah, share what keeps you in balance. Absolutely. So thank you for taking the time to join us and listening to us, and we'll kick it next week. So have a great day, everybody.
See you next week.